Judy, you look absolutely radiant. This is everything you ever dreamed of, isn't it? My best friend Katie was adjusting my veil, her eyes sparkling with tears she was trying not to shed. The bridal suite at the Riverside Manor in Portland, Oregon, was filled with the scent of roses and champagne, and through the tall windows, I could see the tent where 200 guests were already seated, waiting for me to make my entrance. My name is Judy. I'm 34 years old, and until about 10 minutes ago, I genuinely believed this was the happiest day of my life. I had spent the last year planning every detail of this wedding with my fiancé Connor. We'd met 3 years earlier at a marketing conference in Seattle, and from our first conversation about brand strategy, I knew he was different. He was charming, successful, and seemed to understand me in ways nobody else ever had. Connor ran his own digital advertising agency, and I worked as a creative director for a boutique design firm downtown. We were the perfect power couple, or so everyone kept telling us. The morning had started like something out of a magazine. Hair and makeup at 7 a.m., mimosas with my bridesmaids, the careful process of getting into my dress. My mother had cried when she first saw me, and even my usually stoic father had gotten misty-eyed. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as I'd planned it. But then Stephen, our photographer, knocked on the door. Stephen was a friend of a friend, someone I'd hired because his portfolio was stunning and his rates were reasonable. He was in his late 40s, quiet and professional, the kind of person who blended into the background while capturing moments you didn't even realize were happening. I'd barely spoken to him all morning except to approve a few shots he'd shown me on his camera. "Judy, can I speak with you for a moment, privately?" His voice was low, almost apologetic. Katie glanced at me, then at Stephen, and I could see the confusion on her face. "Is something wrong with the photos?" she asked. "No, the photos are fine. I just need 1 minute with the bride." Stephen's expression was serious in a way that made my stomach clench. Katie squeezed my hand and stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind her. Stephen moved closer, his camera hanging around his neck. He looked uncomfortable, like he was about to deliver bad news he didn't want to share. "I'm really sorry to do this," he said quietly. "But I was shooting some candid moments outside about 20 minutes ago, and I captured something I think you need to see before you walk down that aisle." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" He pulled up an image on the back of his camera and turned the screen toward me. "Please, look at this." At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The image was taken from behind one of the large white tents set up on the lawn. In the photograph, 2 figures were pressed together in what was unmistakably a kiss. The angle was partially obscured by the tent fabric, but I could see enough. One of the figures was wearing a gray suit identical to the ones Connor and his groomsmen were wearing. The other was wearing the exact same gray suit. My hands started shaking as I took the camera from Stephen. I zoomed in on the image, my eyes tracing the details. The man on the left had dark hair styled exactly like Connor's, and on his left hand, I could clearly see the vintage watch his grandfather had given him. The watch he never took off. The watch he was supposed to be wearing while waiting for me at the altar. The man he was kissing was Philip, his best man. His best friend since college. The man who'd given a touching speech at our engagement party about how Connor and I were meant to be together. "I thought you should know before you made it official," Stephen said softly. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear today." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the photograph, my mind racing through every interaction I'd ever witnessed between Connor and Philip. All the times they'd gone on weekend trips together. The inside jokes I never quite understood. The way Philip's girlfriend of 2 years had mysteriously broken up with him 6 months ago, right around the time Connor had become even more attentive and loving toward me. It all made horrible, perfect sense. Katie knocked on the door. "Judy, they're ready for you. Everyone's waiting." I looked at Stephen, then down at my wedding dress, then back at the camera screen. 200 people were sitting outside right now, expecting a ceremony. My parents had spent a fortune on this day. The catering alone had cost $15,000. The band, the flowers, the venue rental, everything had been planned and paid for. And Connor was outside kissing his best man 20 minutes before he was supposed to marry me. "Can you send that photo to my phone?" I asked Stephen, my voice surprisingly steady. He nodded, and within seconds, my phone buzzed with the image. "Thank you for showing me," I said. "And please don't mention this to anyone else. Not yet." Stephen looked uncertain, but nodded. "Whatever you need." He left the room, and I stood there alone in my wedding dress, holding my phone with the evidence of Connor's betrayal, while wedding music started playing outside. Katie came back in, her face bright with excitement. "It's time. Oh my God, Judy, you're about to get married." I looked at her, my best friend since high school, and felt a wave of anger mixed with something else. Determination, maybe, or just pure shock that hadn't quite transformed into the breakdown I probably should have been having. "Katie, I need you to do something for me," I said quietly. "And I need you to trust me completely without asking questions." Her smile faded. "What's wrong? You look pale." "I'm fine, but I need you to find the venue coordinator and tell her I need the projector and screen set up in the reception hall. Tell her it's for a surprise slideshow during the toasts. Can you do that?" Katie frowned. "We didn't plan a slideshow. What's going on?" "Please, Katie, just trust me. I'll explain everything later." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll take care of it." After she left, I sat down carefully in my dress and tried to think clearly. My mind was racing through options, scenarios, possibilities. I could walk out there right now and confront Connor in front of everyone. I could call off the wedding and send everyone home. I could pretend I never saw the photograph and marry him anyway, dealing with this disaster privately later. But none of those options felt right. Connor had made me believe he loved me. He'd proposed on a beach in Maui at sunset, getting down on one knee and telling me I was the only person he'd ever want to spend his life with. He'd helped me pick out this dress, spending hours at bridal shops while I tried on gown after gown. He'd cried when we'd finalized the guest list, talking about how lucky he was to have found me. All of it had been a lie. And Philip. God, Philip had been at our engagement party, our birthday dinners, our weekend barbecues. He'd acted like he was happy for us, like he supported our relationship. His toast at the rehearsal dinner last night had been about friendship and love and commitment. He'd looked me in the eye and said Connor was the luckiest man alive. The hypocrisy of it made my hands shake with rage. My mother knocked on the door and peeked in. "Sweetheart, we're all ready. Your father is waiting." I took a deep breath and stood up, smoothing down my dress. "I'm coming." Walking down the hallway toward where my father stood waiting, I felt strangely calm. My dad looked handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes getting teary the moment he saw me. "You're beautiful, Judy Bean," he said, using his old nickname for me. "I can't believe my little girl is getting married." I linked my arm through his, and we walked toward the entrance to the ceremony space. Through the doorway, I could see all the guests standing, turned toward us expectantly. At the end of the aisle, Connor stood next to the officiant, looking nervous and excited. Philip stood beside him as best man, wearing an identical gray suit, his expression solemn and supportive. The image from Stephen's photograph flashed through my mind. The two of them pressed together, hidden behind the tent 20 minutes ago. The music swelled, and my father and I began walking down the aisle. Everyone smiled at me. Friends I'd known for years, family members who'd traveled from across the country, Connor's colleagues and clients. They all thought they were about to witness a beautiful love story. They had no idea what was really happening. Connor's eyes locked on mine as I got closer, and I saw genuine emotion there. Love, maybe, or something that looked like it. For a second, I almost doubted what I'd seen in that photograph. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Then I saw Philip glance at Connor, and the look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. When we reached the altar, my father kissed my cheek and placed my hand in Connor's. Connor's palm was sweaty as he squeezed my fingers. "You look incredible," he whispered. I smiled at him and didn't say anything. The officiant began speaking, going through the traditional opening about love and commitment and the joining of two souls. I barely heard the words. I was too focused on keeping my composure, on making sure my face showed nothing but the joy of a happy bride. "If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace," the officiant said. I almost laughed. Stephen knew. I knew. But we all stayed silent. The ceremony continued. Connor recited his vows, his voice thick with emotion, telling me how much I meant to him, how he couldn't imagine life without me. Philip handed him the ring at the appropriate moment, and I watched Connor's fingers brush against Philip's hand. When it was my turn to recite my vows, I looked Connor directly in the eyes and spoke the words I'd written months ago, back when I'd believed every promise he'd made me. "Connor, I promise to stand by you through everything, through honesty and dishonesty, through truth and lies. I promise to show you exactly what you deserve." He smiled, not catching the edge in my words. Nobody did. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and Connor kissed me while everyone applauded. We walked back down the aisle together as a married couple, and all I could think about was the reception that was about to begin. The cocktail hour passed in a blur. I smiled and accepted congratulations from guests while my mind worked through the plan forming in my head. Katie found me near the bar and whispered that the projector was set up in the reception hall as I'd requested. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" she asked. "Soon," I promised. "Just stay close to me during the toasts, okay?" The reception hall at Riverside Manor was gorgeous. String lights hung from the ceiling, flowers covered every surface, and our names were spelled out in elegant script on a banner behind the head table. Everything was perfect, just like I'd imagined, except the groom I'd just married had been kissing his best man less than an hour before our ceremony. Connor took my hand as we entered the hall, and everyone cheered. We did our first dance to the song we'd chosen together, and he held me close, whispering about how happy he was, how this was the best day of his life. I rested my head on his shoulder and said nothing. Dinner was served, and I barely tasted the expensive meal I'd spent hours selecting. Connor's mother, Margaret, came over to hug me and welcome me to the family. She was a sweet woman who'd always been kind to me, and I felt a pang of guilt knowing what was about to happen. But I pushed it aside. Margaret deserved to know who her son really was. After dinner, the toast began. My father went first, giving a touching speech about watching me grow up and knowing Connor would take care of me. Several guests wiped away tears. Then it was Philip's turn. He stood up with his champagne glass, and I watched him closely. He looked confident, comfortable, like he'd done nothing wrong. Like he hadn't destroyed my wedding day and my relationship. "I've known Connor since we were 18 years old," Philip began. "We were roommates freshman year of college, and from day one, I knew he was someone special. We've been through everything together. Every breakup, every job change, every major life decision." Connor was watching Philip with an expression I'd seen before but never understood. Affection, yes, but something deeper. Something intimate. When Connor told me he was going to propose to Judy, I was thrilled for him, Philip continued. I knew she was special because he talked about her constantly. He couldn't stop telling me how perfect she was, how lucky he felt, and I'm so happy to see him finally getting the life he's always deserved. The irony of those words would have been funny if I wasn't so angry. Philip raised his glass. "To Connor and Judy, may your marriage be filled with love, honesty, and happiness." Everyone drank and applauded. I stood up. The room quieted as people noticed I was on my feet. Connor looked confused. Usually, the bride didn't give a toast at her own wedding, but I saw him smile encouragingly, probably thinking I was just being spontaneous. "Thank you all so much for being here today," I said, my voice steady. "This has been such a memorable day, and I'm so grateful to have all of you here to witness it." I walked over to where Katie had helped set up the projector, my phone in my hand. I wanted to share something special with everyone. Our photographer Steven captured some incredible candid moments today, and I thought it would be nice to show you all one of my favorites. I connected my phone to the projector. Connor's face went pale. He'd noticed what I was doing. The photograph appeared on the large screen behind the head table, blown up to enormous proportions. Connor and Philip, pressed together behind the tent, kissing. The image was crystal clear, impossible to misinterpret. The timestamp in the corner showed it was taken at 11:37 a.m., less than an hour before the ceremony began. Gasps erupted throughout the room. I turned to face the crowd, still holding my champagne glass. I received this photograph about 15 minutes before I walked down the aisle today. Steven, our wonderful photographer, thought I should see it before I made things official. Connor stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Judy, wait." "No, Connor, I'm done waiting." I looked at him, then at Philip, who had gone completely white. "I'm done with the lies. I'm done pretending. I'm done being the fool who believed everything you told me." Margaret had her hand over her mouth, staring at the screen in horror. Connor's father sat frozen in his chair, his face red. "I stood at that altar and listened to you, promised to love me and be faithful to me," I continued. "And all the while, you'd been kissing your best man behind a tent on our wedding day." "It's not what it looks like," Connor said desperately. "That photo is misleading." "Really? Because it looks like you and Philip were kissing. And based on Philip's reaction right now, I don't think I'm misunderstanding anything." Philip had tears running down his face. He wasn't even trying to deny it. The room erupted into chaos. Guests were talking over each other, some standing up to see the screen better, others turning to their neighbors in shock. Connor's mother started crying, and his father stood up and walked toward Connor with a furious expression. I set my champagne glass down on the table and looked directly at Connor. "I want an annulment. I want every penny I spent on this wedding reimbursed. And I want you out of my life completely." "Judy, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You used me. You lied to me. You made me believe we were building a life together when you were in love with someone else the entire time." I turned to face the room full of guests. "Thank you all for coming today. I'm sorry you had to witness this, but I thought you all deserved to know the truth. The bar is still open, and the band is paid for, so please enjoy the rest of the evening. Consider it a celebration of honesty, finally." I walked out of the reception hall with my head held high, even though my legs were shaking. Behind me, I could hear Connor calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Katie caught up with me in the hallway, grabbing my arm. "Oh my God, Judy, oh my God. I can't believe that just happened." Her eyes were wide with shock. "I need to get out of this dress," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm for what had just occurred. Katie helped me back to the bridal suite, and I started pulling pins out of my hair with trembling hands. The face looking back at me from the mirror didn't look like mine. That woman had just blown up her entire wedding in front of 200 people. That woman had just humiliated her brand new husband and his best man in the most public way possible. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just a strange emptiness. "I need you to call my lawyer," I told Katie. "Her name is Patricia, and her number is in my phone under favorites. Tell her what happened and that I need to meet with her first thing tomorrow morning." "Are you sure you want to do this tonight? Maybe you should wait until you've calmed down." "I'm perfectly calm," I interrupted. "Connor committed fraud. He married me under false pretenses. I want this marriage annulled, and I want him to pay for what he did." Katie nodded and picked up my phone. While she made the call, I changed out of my wedding dress and into the jeans and sweater I'd brought for later. The dress lay on the floor in a heap of expensive lace and silk, and I felt absolutely nothing looking at it. There was a knock on the door. "Judy? It's your mom." I opened the door to find both my parents standing there. My mother's mascara was running down her face, and my father looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Sweetheart, what do you need? What can we do?" My mother pulled me into a hug, and I felt her shaking. "I need you both to go home," I said quietly. "I'm going to stay at Katie's tonight. I'll call you tomorrow." "But the hotel room, we booked the honeymoon suite for you," my father said. "I'm not staying there. Connor can have it." I pulled back from my mother. "I'm sorry this day turned out like this. I'm sorry you spent all that money." "Don't you dare apologize," my father said fiercely. "That boy lied to all of us. He's the one who should be sorry." My mother was crying harder now. "I just don't understand. How could he do this? How could he marry you while he was in love with someone else?" "I don't know, Mom, but I'm going to find out." After my parents left, Katie and I gathered my things. My phone kept buzzing with calls and texts. Most were from concerned friends and family members, but several were from Connor. I ignored all of them except one text from Stephen, the photographer. "I'm so sorry about what happened. If you need any additional copies of that photo for legal purposes, please let me know. No charge." I texted back a thank you, and then turned off my phone. We were heading toward the exit when we ran into Connor's mother, Margaret. She'd been crying, her elegant makeup ruined, and she looked devastated. "Judy, please, can we talk for just a moment?" Katie squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to stay?" "It's okay." I nodded to Margaret. "I'll meet you at the car." Margaret and I stepped into a small side room. She closed the door and turned to face me, wringing her hands. "I had no idea," she said immediately. "I swear to you, I had no idea about Connor and Philip. If I had known, I would have told you. I would have stopped this wedding." "I believe you," I said, and I did. Margaret had always been kind to me. "I confronted Connor after you left. He admitted it. He said he's been in love with Philip for years, but he thought if he married you, he could make those feelings go away." She wiped her eyes. "I'm so ashamed of him. I don't even recognize my own son right now." "Did he say why he didn't just call off the wedding? Why did he go through with it?" Margaret looked away. "He said he was scared. Scared of what people would think. Scared of disappointing everyone. He thought if he just committed to you, he could force himself to be the person everyone expected him to be." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So he decided to commit fraud instead. He decided to ruin my life rather than be honest about who he is. I know nothing I say can make this better. But I want you to know that his father and I support whatever legal action you decide to take. Connor needs to face consequences for what he's done." That surprised me. "You'd support me suing your own son? He hurt you. He humiliated you. He lied to everyone who loves him." Margaret's voice was firm. "We raised him better than this. If facing legal consequences is what it takes for him to understand the gravity of what he's done, then so be it." After Margaret left, I sat alone in that small room for a few minutes, trying to process everything. Connor had known. He'd known all along that he was living a lie, that he was in love with someone else, and he'd married me anyway. He'd stood at that altar and made promises he never intended to keep, all because he was too afraid to be honest about who he really was. I should have felt sorry for him. Part of me knew that living in denial about your sexuality couldn't be easy, that Connor was probably struggling with his own demons. But the sympathy I might have felt was buried under layers of anger and betrayal. He could have struggled with his identity without destroying mine in the process. Katie was waiting in the parking lot when I finally came out. She'd loaded all my things into her car, and she hugged me tight the moment she saw me. "We're going to get through this," she said. "You're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. We drove back to her apartment in silence. My phone, which I'd turned back on, wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from friends, voicemails from family, social media notifications from people I barely knew who'd somehow already heard about what happened. News traveled fast in our circle. One text stood out, though. It was from someone named Jeremy, and it took me a moment to remember who that was. Then it clicked. Jeremy had dated Connor about 6 years ago, before I'd met him. They'd been together for almost a year before breaking up. "Judy, I just heard what happened at your wedding. I need to talk to you. There are things you should know about Connor. Please call me when you can." I called Jeremy the next morning from Katie's couch, where I'd spent a sleepless night staring at the ceiling. He picked up on the first ring. "Judy, God, I'm so sorry about what happened. Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "Your text said you had information about Connor?" "Yeah. Look, I should have reached out sooner, but I didn't know how. After Connor and I broke up, he made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. He paid me $20,000 to keep quiet about our relationship." I sat up straight. "What?" "His family is pretty conservative, and back then, Connor wasn't ready to come out. So when we broke up, he was terrified I'd tell people we'd been together. His lawyer drew up this whole NDA saying I couldn't discuss our relationship with anyone, especially not anyone Connor might date in the future." My mind was racing. "But you're telling me now. Doesn't that violate the NDA?" "Probably. But after seeing what he did to you, I don't care anymore. You deserve to know the truth." Jeremy paused. "Connor has done this before, Judy. I'm not the only one he paid off." "What do you mean?" "After me, he dated a woman named Stephanie for about 2 years. He proposed to her, just like he did with you. They even got as far as sending out save the dates for their wedding. Then he called it off 3 weeks before the ceremony. Stephanie was devastated." "Why did he call it off?" "Because he'd met Philip. They'd started working together on some business project, and Connor fell hard for him. He broke off the engagement with Stephanie and told her it was because they weren't compatible. She found out later that he was seeing someone else, but she never knew it was a man." I felt sick. Did he pay her off too? I don't know for sure, but knowing Connor, probably. He's terrified of anyone knowing he's gay. His entire life is built on this image of being the perfect straight businessman. The idea of people knowing the truth is his worst nightmare. After I hung up with Jeremy, I immediately called Patricia, my lawyer. She'd already heard from Katie about what happened, and had started drawing up annulment papers. "This gets more interesting," Patricia said after I told her about Jeremy's call. "If Connor has a pattern of fraudulent behavior in relationships, that strengthens our case significantly. But we need to be careful. If he made other people sign NDAs, he's going to fight hard to keep this quiet." "I don't want it kept quiet," I said. "I want everyone to know what he did." "Judy, I understand you're angry, but you need to think strategically. Connor comes from money. His family can afford excellent lawyers. If you push too hard, they'll make this very ugly." "It's already ugly, Patricia. He married me knowing he was in love with someone else. He committed fraud. I want him held accountable." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Okay, but I need you to understand what you're getting into. This won't be a quick, clean annulment. Connor will likely contest it. His lawyers will try to paint you as vindictive and unstable. They'll argue that one photograph isn't proof of fraud. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes." "All right. Then let's do this properly. I'm going to need you to write down everything you can remember about your relationship with Connor. Any conversations where he professed his love, any promises he made, any time he might have seemed conflicted or withdrawn. Everything." I spent the rest of the day at Katie's apartment, writing out a detailed timeline of my relationship with Connor. Looking back at it all with fresh eyes, I saw signs I'd missed before. The way he'd sometimes pull away when things got too intimate. The business trips he'd take with Philip that seemed to happen more frequently as our wedding approached. The fact that he'd insisted on separate bachelor and bachelorette parties, spending an entire weekend in Vegas with just his male friends. I'd thought I was being a cool, understanding fiancé by giving him space. I hadn't realized I was being played. By the third day, the story had spread beyond our immediate social circle. Someone at the wedding had posted about what happened on social media, and it had gone viral. People who didn't even know us were commenting on the situation, debating whether what I'd done was justified or cruel. Some praised me for exposing Connor's lies. Others said I should have handled it privately, that public humiliation was never acceptable. I didn't care what strangers thought, but it was harder to ignore the messages from people I knew. Connor's business partner, a man named Douglas, called me. "Judy, I need you to take down that photograph. It's hurting Connor's reputation. Several clients have already pulled their contracts because of the negative publicity. Maybe Connor should have thought about that before he decided to marry me while in love with his best man," I replied. "I understand you're upset, but this is affecting people's livelihoods. Our entire company is suffering because of what you did." What I did? I showed people the truth. If Connor's company is suffering, that's a consequence of his own actions, not mine. Douglas hung up on me. The calls kept coming. Friends of Connor's, people from his business network, even a few of my own acquaintances who thought I'd gone too far. They all wanted me to take responsibility for ruining Connor's life, as if he hadn't ruined mine first. Then I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Judy, my name is Stephanie. Jeremy gave me your number. I hope that's okay." Stephanie, Connor's former fiancée. "Of course," I said. "Jeremy mentioned you. I'm sorry about what happened with you and Connor. I'm sorry about what happened to you. What he did at your wedding is worse than anything he did to me." Stephanie paused. "Look, I know this is probably the last thing you want to think about right now, but I wanted to let you know that you're not alone. Connor has hurt multiple women, and if you're serious about holding him accountable, I'd like to help." "How?" I kept records, emails, texts, everything. I never signed an NDA like Jeremy did, so I'm free to share it all. And I know at least 2 other women who dated Connor and discovered he was lying to them. If we all come forward together, it makes your case stronger. I felt something shift inside me. I'd been thinking of this as my personal battle against Connor. But it wasn't just about me. It was about a pattern of behavior, a habit of using people and discarding them when they were no longer useful. "Yes," I said. "I want to hear everything." Patricia's office was in downtown Portland, on the 15th floor of a sleek glass building. When I arrived for our meeting the following week, I found Stephanie already there, along with another woman named Claire, who'd apparently also been one of Connor's victims. "Thank you both for coming," Patricia said, gesturing for us to sit. "I've reviewed all the materials you've sent me, and I believe we have a very strong case not just for annulment, but for fraud and emotional distress." Stephanie was 38, a graphic designer with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. Claire was younger, maybe 27, and worked as a marketing consultant. Both of them had dated Connor before he met me, and both had stories remarkably similar to mine. "He told me he loved me," Claire said. "We were together for a year and a half. He talked about getting married, having kids, building a life together. Then one day he just ended it. Said he wasn't ready for commitment. 2 months later, I found out through mutual friends that he was dating someone new. He did the same thing to me," Stephanie added. "Except we actually got engaged. I picked out a dress, we booked a venue, sent save the dates to everyone. Then 3 weeks before the wedding, he called it off. No real explanation. Just that he'd realized we weren't right for each other." I looked at Patricia. "Can we actually build a legal case around this? It's not like what he did to them is illegal." "Not on its own, no. but combined with your situation, it establishes a pattern of deceptive behavior. And Judy, there's something else you should know. Patricia pulled out a folder. I did some digging into Connor's business dealings. His company has been struggling financially for the past 2 years. They've been sued 3 times by former clients for breach of contract and false advertising. What does that have to do with our marriage? I think Connor married you for financial security. Your salary as a creative director is substantial, and you have significant savings. I believe he saw you as a safety net for when his business collapsed. The pieces were clicking into place. Connor had been unusually interested in my finances during our engagement. He'd suggested we open a joint bank account, combine our assets, even put both our names on the mortgage when we bought a house. At the time, I'd thought it was romantic. Now I saw it for what it was, a backup plan. He was going to use me, I said slowly. I think so, yes. And I think when you file for annulment, he's going to fight it hard because he can't afford to lose access to your money. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia built our case. She interviewed Jeremy, Stephanie, and Claire. She gathered financial records showing Connor's business problems. She even tracked down Philip, who initially refused to talk, but eventually agreed to give a statement after his own lawyer advised him that cooperation might reduce his legal liability. Philip's statement was devastating. He confirmed that he and Connor had been involved romantically for over 3 years, that their relationship had continued throughout Connor's engagement to me, and that they'd discussed calling off the wedding multiple times. But Connor had always insisted on going through with it, saying he needed to maintain his image. He told me that after we were married, we could figure out how to be together discreetly, Philip admitted in his deposition. He said Judy would eventually understand, or that he'd find a way to end things with her after a few years. He wasn't thinking about her feelings at all. Reading those words made me feel physically ill. The media attention intensified as word spread about the lawsuit. Local news picked up the story, then regional outlets, then national ones. I became known as the bride who exposed her groom at their wedding reception. People wanted interviews, wanted me to appear on talk shows, wanted to turn my trauma into entertainment. I declined everything. This wasn't about fame or attention. It was about justice. Connor's lawyers fought back hard, just as Patricia had predicted. They argued that one photograph didn't prove anything, that I was a jilted woman seeking revenge, that I'd humiliated their client without cause. They claimed Connor and Philip had simply been having a private conversation that I'd misinterpreted. But Patricia was brilliant. She brought in Stephen, who testified that the photograph clearly showed 2 men kissing, not talking. She presented the statements from Jeremy, Stephanie, and Claire, establishing Connor's pattern of deceptive relationships. And most damning of all, she played a recording. I'd forgotten about it until Patricia asked if I had any videos or audio from the wedding day. Then I remembered. My phone had been on and recording in my purse during the ceremony. It was something Katie had suggested, wanting to capture the audio of our vows for posterity. The recording had caught more than our vows. It had caught Connor and Philip talking in whispered voices right before the ceremony began. "Are you sure about this?" Philip's voice was barely audible on the recording, but Patricia had it enhanced by an audio expert. "I have to do this," Connor replied. "Once we're married, I'll have access to her accounts. We can use that to keep the business afloat until we figure something else out." "But Connor, she's going to find out eventually. This isn't sustainable." "I know. But I just need to buy some time. A year, maybe 2. Then we'll figure out how to end things quietly." When that recording played in the courtroom during our hearing, I watched Connor's face turn white. His lawyers immediately requested a recess, and I could hear them arguing with him in harsh whispers. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Helena, looked disgusted. "Mr. Connor, do you have anything to say for yourself?" she asked when the hearing resumed. Connor stood up slowly. For a moment, he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or regret. But it was too late for any of that. "Your Honor, I made a terrible mistake. I hurt someone who trusted me, and I have no excuse for my behavior. That's not an excuse, Mr. Connor. That's barely even an apology. Judge Helena shuffled through the papers in front of her. I'm granting the annulment. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to reimburse Miss Judy for all wedding expenses, including the venue, catering, photography, and her wedding dress. That comes to approximately $87,000. You will also pay her legal fees. Connor's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client doesn't have that kind of money. Then he should have thought about that before committing fraud. Judge Helena's voice was sharp. This court does not look kindly on individuals who use marriage as a tool for financial gain. Mr. Connor, you're fortunate Miss Judy isn't pursuing additional damages for emotional distress. Patricia leaned over and whispered, Do you want to pursue emotional distress damages? We could probably get another $50,000. I thought about it. Then I shook my head. I just want this to be over. The annulment was finalized 6 weeks after the wedding that never should have happened. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months, even though the emotional weight of everything hadn't fully lifted yet. Connor was required to pay me back in installments since he couldn't come up with the full amount immediately. His business was indeed failing, just as Patricia had discovered. Within 3 months of our annulment, his company declared bankruptcy. His business partner Douglas blamed me publicly, posting on social media about how I'd destroyed their reputation and cost them everything. I didn't respond. The truth spoke for itself. Katie threw me a small celebration dinner at her apartment the night the annulment became official. It was just the two of us, a bottle of wine and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. So what now? She asked. What's the next chapter for Judy? I'd been thinking about that question constantly. The wedding venue had refunded a portion of their fee since we'd canceled the honeymoon suite and some other services. Combined with the money Connor was paying back, I had a significant amount of cash that was supposed to have gone toward our future together. I want to travel, I said suddenly. I've been saving for years to buy a house with Connor, planning a life that was never real. I want to use that money to actually live. Where would you go? Everywhere. Europe, Asia, South America. All the places I've dreamed about but never made time for because I was too busy building a life with someone who was lying to me the entire time. Katie grinned. That sounds perfect. When do you leave? As soon as I can arrange it. I gave my notice at work the following week. My boss was understanding, even supportive. You've been through hell, she said. Take the time you need. If you want your job back when you return, we'll make it work. But I wasn't sure I wanted to come back to Portland at all. Too many memories, too many places that reminded me of Connor and the life we'd planned. My parents were worried about me traveling alone, but they also understood I needed this. My father pulled me aside before I left and pressed an envelope into my hands. It's not much, but it's what your mother and I had set aside for the wedding. Since Connor's paying you back, we want you to have this for your trip. Inside was a check for $15,000. Dad, I can't take this. You can and you will. You deserve to be happy, Judy Bean. Go find yourself. I started in Italy, spending 2 weeks wandering through Rome, Florence, and Venice. I ate pasta and gelato without counting calories, visited museums and churches, and slowly started to feel like myself again. The constant noise in my head about Connor and the wedding began to quiet. In Florence, I met a group of Australian women who were also traveling solo. We bonded over wine and shared stories of heartbreak and adventure. One of them, a woman named Fiona who was 52 and had recently divorced her husband of 30 years, told me something that stuck with me. The best thing about getting your heart broken is that it forces you to rebuild yourself. And when you rebuild, you get to decide who you want to be. You're not stuck with the person you were before. I thought about that a lot as I traveled. Who did I want to be now? From Italy, I went to Greece, then to Turkey. I learned to haggle in markets, tried foods I'd never heard of, made friends with locals and fellow travelers. Every day felt like a small rebellion against the life I'd almost settled for. 3 months into my trip, I was in Thailand when I got an email from Stephanie. She and Claire had started a blog about their experiences with Connor, and it had gained significant attention. Other women had come forward with their own stories about Connor and men like him who used relationships as tools for financial or social gain. "We're thinking about turning this into something bigger," Stephanie wrote. "Maybe a support network or a nonprofit. Would you be interested in being involved when you're back?" I thought about it for a long time before responding. Part of me wanted to leave Connor and everything associated with him in the past. But another part of me recognized that what he'd done wasn't unique. There were countless people who manipulated others, who built relationships on lies, who left destruction in their wake. "Yes," I wrote back. "I'm interested." By the time I reached Japan, I'd been traveling for 5 months. I'd spent time in a dozen countries, learned phrases in 6 languages, and taken thousands of photographs. But more importantly, I'd started to heal. One evening in Kyoto, I was sitting in a traditional tea house when my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a post on social media. Normally I ignored these, but something made me click on it. It was an article from a business magazine about Connor's company officially closing its doors. The article mentioned the fraud lawsuit, the bankruptcy, and the scandal that had destroyed his reputation. At the bottom was a quote from Connor himself. "I made choices that hurt people I cared about, and I'm living with those consequences every day. I hope that someday I can make amends for the damage I've caused." I stared at those words for a long time, trying to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, vindication, anything. But all I felt was a profound sense of relief that I'd escaped when I did. I returned to Portland 8 months after leaving. The city felt different. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed. I'd spent nearly 3/4 of a year rediscovering who I was without Connor, without the wedding, without the identity I'd built as his fiancée, and then his almost wife. Katie picked me up from the airport, and we hugged for a long time in the arrivals area. "You look amazing," she said, holding me at arm's length. "Seriously, you're glowing." "I feel different," I admitted. "I feel like myself again." We drove back to her apartment, where she'd been storing the few belongings I hadn't sold or donated before leaving. As we unloaded my suitcases, she filled me in on everything I'd missed. "Connor moved to Seattle," she told me. "Apparently he and Philip are living together now. It's official. He came out publicly about 3 months ago." "How did that go?" "Mixed reactions. Some people praised him for being honest. Others pointed out that being honest after you've already destroyed multiple people's lives isn't exactly brave." I nodded. I'd seen some of the news coverage online, had read the think pieces about Connor's situation. Everyone had an opinion about whether he deserved sympathy or condemnation. "What about his parents?" I asked. "Margaret reached out to me a few times while you were gone. She wanted to make sure you were okay. I think she feels terrible about everything." That surprised me. "She does?" "Yeah. She actually donated to that nonprofit Stephanie and Claire started. The one for people who've been deceived in relationships. The nonprofit was called Truth in Love, and it had grown significantly in the months I'd been traveling. Stephanie and Claire had built it into a legitimate organization offering support groups, legal resources, and educational programs about recognizing manipulative relationships. I'd been consulting with them remotely while traveling, and now that I was back, I wanted to get more involved. My first day volunteering at their Portland office was emotional. I met dozens of people who'd been through situations similar to mine. Some had been catfished online, others had discovered their partners were living double lives, still others had been used for money or social status. Each story was unique, but the common thread was betrayal and the struggle to rebuild afterward. "You being here means a lot," Claire told me. "You're the face of this movement in a lot of ways. People saw you stand up for yourself in the most public way possible, and it inspired them." I wasn't sure how I felt about being the face of anything, but I understood that my story had resonated with people, and if sharing it could help others avoid similar situations, then maybe something good had come from all the pain. I also started working with Patricia on a different kind of project. We were developing a legal guide for people trying to get out of fraudulent marriages, with information about annulments, grounds for divorce based on deception, and how to protect your assets when your partner has been dishonest. You know what's interesting? Patricia said during one of our planning meetings. Since your case became public, I've had 17 new clients come to me with similar situations. Connor isn't unique. There are a lot of people out there living lies and dragging others into them. 6 months after returning to Portland, I was invited to speak at a conference about relationship fraud. The venue was in Seattle, ironically, and I almost declined because I didn't want to risk running into Connor, but Stephanie convinced me to do it. You can't let him control your choices anymore, she said. If he happens to be there, so what? You've moved on. You're thriving. Show him that. The conference was held in a hotel downtown, and over 300 people attended. I spoke on a panel with Stephanie, Claire, and 2 therapists who specialized in helping survivors of deceptive relationships. We discussed warning signs, red flags, and how to rebuild trust after betrayal. During the question and answer portion, a woman in the audience raised her hand. How did you find the courage to expose him so publicly? Weren't you afraid of what people would think? I thought about that question carefully before answering. I was terrified, I admitted. Standing up in front of everyone at my wedding and showing that photograph was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I was more afraid of staying silent. I was more afraid of protecting Connor's reputation at the expense of my own truth. Do you regret it? Someone else asked. No, not for a second. What I regret is not seeing the signs sooner. I regret ignoring my instincts when they told me something was off. But exposing the truth? That's the one thing I did right. After the panel, several people came up to thank me for sharing my story. One woman, probably in her 40s, had tears in her eyes. I've been living with a lie for 6 years, she whispered. My husband has been having an affair with his business partner, and I've known about it but kept quiet because I was afraid of what people would say. Hearing you speak today made me realize I deserve better than this. You do, I told her. You absolutely do. As I was leaving the conference, I saw him. Connor was standing near the exit, almost like he'd been waiting for me. Philip was next to him, and they were holding hands. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then Connor approached. Judy, can we talk? I glanced at Katie, who'd come to the conference with me for moral support. She gave me a look that said it was my choice. I could walk away, or I could hear what Connor had to say. 5 minutes, I told him. We moved to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. Philip stayed back, giving us space, but I could feel him watching. Connor looked different, thinner, with circles under his eyes. His hair was longer, less styled than he used to keep it. He looked like someone who'd been through something difficult. I know you probably don't want to hear this, he began, but I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry for everything I put you through. I crossed my arms. What do you want, Connor? Why are you here? I saw that you were speaking at the conference. I thought maybe it was time we talked face to face. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did, trying to figure out how to make amends. You can't make amends for what you did. You married me knowing you were in love with someone else. You used me. I know. And you're right that I can't undo it. But I want you to understand that I never meant to hurt you the way I did. That doesn't make it better, Connor. You still did it. Your intentions don't erase the impact. He nodded, looking down. I've lost everything. My business, my reputation, most of my friends. My relationship with my parents is destroyed. I'm working as a consultant now, basically freelancing, because nobody wants to hire me full-time. Is that why you're here? You want me to feel sorry for you? No. I'm here because I needed you to hear me say that you were right to do what you did. You were right to expose me. I deserved everything that happened. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but all I saw was someone who'd hit rock bottom and was trying to climb back up. Are you happy now? I asked. With Philip? Connor glanced over at Philip, and his expression softened. Yes, I am. For the first time in my life, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm not hiding. And it's terrifying. But it's also freeing. I'm glad you figured out who you are, but you should have done that before you dragged me into your mess. You're right. I should have. He paused. For what it's worth, I paid back everything I owed you, the full amount. And I wanted to donate to that nonprofit you're working with, but I wasn't sure if you'd want that. Keep your money, Connor. Donate it somewhere else. Truth in Love doesn't need anything from you. He nodded. Okay. I understand. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then Connor said, You look good, Judy. You look happy. I am happy. Happier than I was when I was planning to marry you. I'm glad. He seemed like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. I won't bother you again. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm trying to be better. As he walked away, back to where Philip was waiting, I felt Katie come up beside me. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know. Empty, maybe? Or relieved? He looked rough. He should. He earned it. We left the hotel and walked through downtown Seattle. It was a beautiful evening, the kind where the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. We found a restaurant with outdoor seating and ordered dinner. So, what's next? Katie asked, echoing the question she'd posed to me nearly a year and a half earlier. I don't know yet. I'm thinking about writing a book, about everything that happened, what I learned, how I rebuilt. I think that's a great idea. Your story could help a lot of people. Maybe. Or maybe I just need to write it for myself, to close that chapter completely. We talked late into the evening about the future, about possibilities, about the life I was building for myself. When I finally got back to my hotel room, I sat by the window and thought about everything that had happened since that morning in the bridal suite when Stephen had shown me that photograph. So much had changed. I'd lost the future I thought I was building, but I'd gained something more valuable. Myself. Connor had tried to use me as a shield, a facade to hide behind while he lived his truth in secret. In exposing him, I'd freed both of us, though my freedom had come at a much higher cost. But I'd survived it. More than survived, I'd thrived. The next morning, I flew back to Portland with a clear sense of purpose. I spent the next 6 months writing my book, pouring everything into it. The betrayal, the wedding, the confrontation, the aftermath, and finally, the healing. I wrote about traveling alone, about finding strength I didn't know I had, about learning to trust myself again. When the book was published, it became a bestseller. Readers connected with the raw honesty of it, the refusal to paint myself as a perfect victim or Connor as a one-dimensional villain. Life was more complicated than that. I did interviews, spoke at more conferences, and continued working with Truth in Love. The nonprofit expanded to 12 cities, offering support to thousands of people navigating the aftermath of deceptive relationships. Connor's life continued its downward spiral for several months after our conversation in Seattle. The business community in the Pacific Northwest was small enough that his reputation preceded him everywhere. He struggled to find steady work, and his relationship with Philip, while honest, was strained by the financial and social pressures they faced. His parents eventually reconciled with him, but it took years of family therapy and difficult conversations. Margaret later told me that her son's deception had shattered her trust in ways she was still working to repair. Connor eventually moved to Los Angeles, where nobody knew his story, and started over from scratch. He found work at a small marketing firm willing to give him a chance, and slowly rebuilt his career under a cloud of obscurity. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Philip eventually broke up, unable to overcome the toxicity of how their relationship had begun. Connor remained single, apparently focusing on therapy and personal growth, though I had no way of knowing if his transformation was genuine or just another performance. As for me, I built a life I never could have imagined during those painful months after the wedding. I published 2 more books, became a sought-after speaker on topics of authenticity and resilience, and eventually started a consulting business helping people navigate major life transitions. I traveled when I wanted, worked on projects that mattered to me, and surrounded myself with people who valued honesty above all else. Sometimes late at night, I still thought about that moment in the bridal suite when Stephen showed me the photograph, and I was grateful for the courage I'd found to act on the truth rather than hide from it. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about refusing to let their lies destroy you.